against British colonialism. My father was a refugee also. In the 70s, he was a communist against the nationalist Ba'athists. And then I find myself also a refugee. And that means we have 3 generations of refugees. In the past, I know the refugees like when we leave Iraq in order to see our father in other countries, in Syria, for example, when he came in order to see him. But to me, it's like a travel. It's a very beautiful things in order to see my father. Then this is also happened to me. I have to come to Turkey, for example, to Amman, in order to see my mother, also to come to see me. This is, of course, give me a lot of things in order to think and to rewrite. In the past, for example, in Baghdad, when I was writing, I feel myself, I was heavy with the history of Iraq and Arabic nations, with the documents, my books full of the documents. The experience of refugees liberated me from these things, give me the distance and to see my country from a distance, from afar. So I felt the first time that I am really liberated from all these things, and I feel that the uprooted writer maybe can write better than when I was there, and I feel myself, I was engaged to many things in my country, for example, or I'm afraid to write something because things or other things, for example, for social values or for tribal values, political values. This is thing, and also give me the imagination, as I think the imagination to substitute this relationship with the country or with the earth. So after that, I find myself, I'm without identity. It's better when I have identity, and you can classify myself in one class. The second thing that I find the European love the victims. You know, this is like a game. The people always talk about themselves as a victim, and the European give them the aid. And from the first time, I liberated myself from this. I don't talk about myself as a victim. I find myself, I'm a writer. So as a writer, I have international feelings, me like the others. So I stopped them to invite me, for example, to the conference or as a refugee. No, I'm a writer, but if you would like to talk about the refugees, I can now. Of course, I have experience, but not. This is not link it to other description. So, as I think there is in the history, Feuerbach, the critic, the German critic, when he deported and went to Istanbul, and there he wrote maybe one of the best books in the literary history, the Mimesis. The Mimesis, he wrote it because he hasn't his library, so without references. So this book, the first time we read a book in literary critic, but sentimental book. It's not a theoretical book. So I find after that my books, my novels, which I wrote it in the exile, is more sentimental than the books which I wrote it in my country. So this is my experience really as a writer.
Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω τον κύριο Φιορέτο, ο οποίος εντάξει, δεν είναι πρόσφυγας, δηλαδή ο λόγος, η ανάγκη που οδήγησε τους γονείς του να ζήσουν έξω από τους γενέθλιους τόπους, έξω από τους χώρους καταγωγής τους, δεν ήταν πολεμικές, δεν ήταν η βία, δεν ήταν οι λόγοι που οδήγησαν τον Αλή που έφυγε από το Ιράκ, τους προγόνους. ενδεχομένως να ήταν οικονομική, εκπαιδευτική, αλλά για μένα είναι η ίδια αυτή η διαδικασία. Και η ίδια η συναισθηματική φόρτιση που αισθάνεται κάποιος που αφήνει το παιδικό του δωμάτιο. Είναι μια δυνηρή διαδικασία το να φεύγεις από τις παιδικές σου αναμνήσεις, από την αγκαλιά της μαμάς σου, είτε γιατί σε χωρίζει ένας πόλεμος, είτε σε χωρίζει ένας γάμος. Όπως γίνονταν για παράδειγμα στα παλιά χρόνια εδώ στην Ελλάδα, που να φύγει μια νέα κοπέλα όταν παντρευόταν από το σπίτι της και από το χωριό της, και να πάει σε ένα άλλο χωριό, ήταν μια διαδικασία προσφυγιάς. Και γι' αυτό γράφτηκε και στη λαϊκή μας παράδοση και στα δημοτικά μας τραγούδια, με τον ίδιο πόνο που, για παράδειγμα, θα έβγαινε στο παιδί σου στην ξενιτιά ή θα έφυγε το παιδί σου, θα ήταν θύμα μιας προσφυγιάς. Εσένα πώς, τώρα να σου μιλάω στον ελληνικό γιατί σε αισθάνομαι και πιο οικείο. Πώς σε επηρέασαν αυτές οι εμπειρίες και των δυο γονιών, διαφορετικές χώρες, διαφορετική χώρα δική σου γέννησης, 5 διαφορετικές γλώσσες τις οποίες ενδεχομένως βλέπεις τα όνειρά σου.
Excuse me for speaking in English, because if I were to speak in Greek, I would embarrass all of you, and not least myself. But it does cut to the very heart of your question. My father left this country after the Civil War and couldn't return until after '74. So he was gone for a quarter of a century for political reasons, and not for social reasons, nor for economical reasons, which tended to be the reasons Greeks left the country in the early 60s, before the junta. And he met my mother in Vienna, where he studied. She had been raised during the Third Reich and wanted nothing more than to leave this horrible Viennese society, which was very far from democratic in the early 50s. And they ended up in Sweden, producing children. And so the experience of such children with parents from 2 different countries, born and raised in a third country with a vastly different set of cultural connotations, not to mention the language itself with its history and its politics, produces first and foremost, I think, in the second generation, an acute sense of differences. And you have to grapple with the differences, and you have to negotiate the relationship between loyalties to 2 or 3 different countries, loyalties to 2 or 3 different cultures and languages. This is not very easy for a child. And at the time when I was born, and I belong to roughly the same generation as Ali, although my experiences obviously are vastly different from his. I'm not a refugee in any remote sense of the word. I have spent 40 years of my adult life abroad, so I have a certain notion of what it means to live in a different country. But nevertheless, my DNA is quite different from the one that we're mainly talking about here tonight. And yet, growing up in such a country, you feel as if whatever you do, you run the risk of being disloyal to 1 or 2 of the other cultures that you somehow are supposed to embody. And I think that children tend, in my experience, to be very conservative beings. They want things to be stable, dependable. They seek ways of maintaining an equilibrium. At the time, my parents spoke German with one another, and that was my first tongue. It was the family language, but at the age of 5, I realized that I didn't look like my friends, I didn't have the same kind of name, but I could speak the same language. So I forced Swedish upon my parents, with the somewhat comical result that I had to correct the talks and conference talks and so on of my father at the age of 10. And everyone knows that a boy at the age of 10 may correct a few things grammatically, but he adds just as many mistakes to the text that had been there before. And that brings me to my response to your question. It forces upon the second generation a linguistic authority way before they are equipped and mature enough to take on this responsibility. We know this in, so many, everyone has seen young people bringing their grandmothers or grandfathers to the post office or to the bank and helping them out and so on and so forth. It's almost a sentimental cliche by now, but it does give them an authority within the family which somehow distables the natural relationship between a parent and child. And if you develop certain irritations, as I did, and I think most children with such a sort of setup tend to do, you find ways of, or you're seeking ways of reintroducing stability and reintroducing balance. And in my case, being the person I was, it was language. It served, speaking Swedish served as a ventilation between inner and outer worlds. And so you try to recreate an equilibrium. That was one very, very important aspect of this sense of an identity based on differences, not on solid entities. The second aspect is it's the sense of not being able to say, this is my home. Because by saying that, you take a stance and you disown your heritage. And if you then have a father who has left his country and cannot show you his own country, you get a very distant relationship to whatever he stands for. And you know, as a Greek, obviously they don't have the patent or the monopoly, but they have the patent on nostalgia. So my father was equipped with a very strong sense of being a Greek and wanting to return to Greece at one point or another. And you sense his pathos. And as a child, you identify with his pathos, but you cannot understand the reference of it. So within your father, who behaves a certain way, somewhat comical too when he speaks Swedish, there's a different father. There's a father within the father to whom you don't have access. And that's the father who left his country. That's the father who's, having experiences that you only hear by hearsay, that have some mythological characteristics to them as well. And they are handed down to you as on stone tablets. This happened when I was a boy, this happened there, and so on and so forth. And you cannot question it, and you cannot check the veracity of it, because you don't have access to this culture on your own terms. So it creates a vacuum, and it creates a sense of the first generation being somewhat phantomistic. You cannot really grapple or maintain them and seize them the way in which you would like to. And that's what you're left with. And I think that if you're a refugee coming alone or with your family from one country to another, it's sort of a binary relationship, or bilateral relationship. It's a fairly stable relationship, despite all the anxieties, all the horror, and all the difficulties that come along with it. But it's like a bridge. You know, you have one country here, you have another country here, and you negotiate this relationship. But if you have parents from two different countries in a third country, it's a triangulation, and it's more difficult to negotiate. But I think that ultimately it may also be a certain salvation, because no one has precedence above anybody else. The first country you left is not more important than the country in which you're bringing up your children, nor is the new country more important than the old one. And this, if you can negotiate this, and if you get through puberty, you recreate a certain sense of self based on difference and not on identity.
Ο Άρης λίγο πρόλαβε και την απάντηση στην δεύτερη ενότητα για το τι σημαίνει ο γενέθλιος τόπος για ένα συγγραφέα. Θα επιστρέψουμε σε αυτό. Έχω κρατήσει και κάποιες ερωτήσεις. Βέβαια, βλέπω και πολύ ενδιαφέρουσες αυτές τις δύο ενότητες, τις οποίες πρέπει να καλύψουμε και μετά, αν προκύψει χρόνος, έτσι έχουμε διαθέσιμο χρόνο, θα θέσουμε και άλλα ερωτήματα. Αυτό που θα ήθελα έτσι να μοιραστεί μαζί μας ο κύριος Λεκλέρ δεν είναι μεγάλες προσφυγικές κρίσεις, όπως για παράδειγμα και αυτό το κοινωνικό φαινόμενο που ζούμε τα τελευταία χρόνια στην Ελλάδα, στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, που είναι και ένα ελληνικό ζήτημα και ευρωπαϊκό ζήτημα, ή παλαιότερα και λόγω του πολέμου στο Ιράκ. Θα ήθελα με όλη αυτή την εμπειρία χρόνων που έχει ο ίδιος να μας μιλητή για δύο ιστορίες. Δύο ιστορίες ανθρώπων που έχουν μείνει στο μυαλό του μέσα σε αυτές τις χιλιάδες ιστορίες και που ενδεχομένως θα μπορούσαν να γίνουν μυθιστόρημα, διήγημα ή ιστορία τον ίδιο συγγραφέα ή οποιοδήποτε άλλο.
Well, you're asking me to be a novelist, which is unusual for me, but I'll try to remember some of these situations. But just before that, I also wanted to comment that on some of the comments which were made before, that refugee may not that easy also in the way you say, because each of the situations are extremely different, and sometimes you are hostage of a cause. Just talking about the Palestinian refugee population, if you're an individual Palestinian, it's very difficult to be different from your community because you are still in fight somehow and you have to try to behave in a certain way. The same for the Tibetans or very specific situations which make it very difficult for individuals also to dissociate themselves from a cause. And that I have seen often within these particular populations when the fact that you belong to a certain identity community leads you, or there's an expectancy on the part of the community that you have to live in a certain way and behave in a certain way. And it's very difficult then to be able to exercise your freedom even as an artist. And also what I wanted to comment before finding the right stories to tell you is the fact that for artists and writers that I have met or that I have known about, the whole issue is also which language do you use to write. And you were mentioning several languages you know, and I know you know various languages. You know we have been speaking French so far, but I hear your English now. But I know that you work in Arabic, and that's the language you write in. I have seen that difference with various writers who have come. Either they have written in French, for example, and they have become some of the famous prix Goncourt winners, like sometimes even twice using two identities, like Romain Gary and Émile Ajar. And he came from Russia, even from the Baltic States, from USSR and the Baltic States. His language was not French, but he became a writer in another language than in his initial one. On the contrary, you have writers that I have met, like from Afghanistan, like Atik Raimi, who also won a Goncourt in France, and who writes in his language. And these are some of the issues also that people who have to leave their country or choose to leave their country have to deal with. And so Atik Raimi, that I know will be one of the stories, because he always has his difficulty of behaving like an Afghan and mostly writing in Afghanistan, but he, as he was mentioning before, has also gained some liberty, some freedom by being away from his country of origin and of other nationality. So these transformations may well be something that an individual will win, and others where the situation is extremely difficult, like, and I will stay with the writers, because Stefan Zweig, for example, we were talking about the Third Reich and the 50s, but before, when Stefan Zweig had to leave Vienna, he managed to leave when so many others could not leave, and he managed to find an exile, and he managed to find some protection after some time, but he still, despite having written after having left Austria, he committed suicide. Walter Benjamin, in different conditions, because he was not succeeding to flee France and to get into Spain, he also committed suicide. And there are various aspects of such very strong events happening to individuals, including writers and artists, which will lead to very different situations, either very dramatic or in a way seen as successful.
λίγο να μας εξειδικεύσει ο Αλή τι είναι ο γενέφιλος τάφος για έναν συγγραφέα και αν η λογοτεχνική δημιουργία τελικά έχει μια καταγωγή.
Actually, the creation writing, especially the literature, because the literature is linked to the language. So the language is very important for the writing and the development of the language. In the past, for example, when I was in Iraq, I know how the people create another words, for example, in the market, for example, the street, everywhere. I feel always when I'm writing, I say, I use the same language which people around me talking. So I feel always that I'm really in the world of creation. When I left, I find in the beginning very difficult to write because in the street I'm speaking in French, and the TV, French TV, and I read something in Arabic. I don't find myself. In the beginning, I don't find myself. So in the beginning, I decided to write, to stop, to think. This is the first year of my exile. I tried to stop, to read or to write in Arabic, and then to begin to ameliorate my French, to improve my French in order to write in this language. 3 months or 4 months, I have like a nightmare came to me with the language. All the articles came to me to revenge from me. So this is as I think I stopped to think, to write in other language and come back to write in Arabic. So I felt that the writing as origin, yes, as I think the language, especially the language, it is very important when you would like to create something. So after that, of course, I come back to my existence. You can say by Heidegger, the lovely existence, the forgetting of the existence, that when you left your language, as I think it's like you forget your existence. So I decided at that time not to be like the other writers who left his language and write in another language and has another experience. Writing in Arabic but living in your position.
Well, you obviously cannot generalize. People like Walter Benjamin or Stefan Zweig, they were forced to leave the countries for political reasons and of heritage, ethnic heritage. And perhaps Benjamin considered for a short while when he stayed in Paris to write the odd thing in French, but they were strapped to their language. There are other mentalities and other temperaments, artistic temperaments such as Sioran, who changed language from Romanian to French, or Beckett, who left his English and also wrote in French for completely different reasons. I think that in both those cases, they, or at least Beckett, wanted to leave a language that meant too much to him, that was full of connotations, and French served him very well because it was more abstract, it boiled things down to its essence. And there are many other different reasons, and I think that today we are seeing the results of these generational experiences done 2 or 3 generations ago. we are no longer really certain what counts as a national literature, who contributes to a national literature. And I think that one of the questions one asks oneself, as a writer, living abroad or living at home, but writing in a different language, is to what do I actually belong, and how, what is my stake in this literature. We have this discussion in Sweden, but I see it in other countries as well, and it's a little different from country to country, depending on whether or not the country has a colonial past or not, and is used to dealing with vastly different geographical and historical and political experiences within that language or not, like the English, or for that matter French. Swedish and German have a different history, but in these cases too, we're now into the third, I think even 2.5, maybe third generation of people with different roots, still maintaining the right to write in this, as it were, new language, and changing it. And I see the uncertainty, but also the delight of literary historians who realize that we have to rewrite literary history. We have to rewrite our notions, what it means to belong to a canon. All these things matter, I think. But what should not be forgotten either is the depression that many writers experience, stuck with the language in a different country where no one really understands where they belong literarily, poetically, and so on and so forth. And I think that the ways in which people succeed or not succeed have to do with the ways in which they negotiate the two sides, what it means to leave one culture and one language for another. There's loss, obviously, because you leave something behind, and there's gain, because you're introduced into a new context, and you have to make yourself understood. You have to function within a new system of coordinates. But those, and one would think that those who suffer most are those who are unable to change and transform themselves. And I think that that is the vital question, not the question or the dialectics between loss and gain. It has more to do with the willingness to transform and the willingness to change over time and be influenced by these new cultures in ways that perhaps you cannot really realize. Benjamin Zweig had the difficulty that they were already known. They were already in the pantheon of German letters when they had to leave. They suffered great losses also in terms of symbolical capital. Other people like Nelly Sachs, who left in 1940 for Sweden, she left behind a country where she had spent 50 years, but where she was absolutely unknown as a German writer. She could, as it were, and this is a horrible cliche these days in our language, but she could reinvent herself in Sweden. And 20 years later, she got the Nobel Prize. There's so many different ways of existing as a lingual being in different circumstances that it would be impermissible to generalize. But, sorry, and you wanted to ask, if I may just add one footnote. Where's home? Well, I have a home. It's a flying carpet with 4 legs. It's my writing desk. I think the system of governance tends towards the republic, but I'm its only inhabitant and also its monarch, as it were. So I would think the most proper designation would be enlightened tyranny.
Μας μένουν 9 περίπου λεπτά, γιατί ξέρω ότι είναι πολύ περιορισμένος ο χρόνος. Κλείσαμε έτσι τις 2 βασικές ενότητες συζήτησης. Προφανώς έχουν εγερθεί πολλά ερωτήματα και ζητήματα που θα θέλετε κι εσείς να τα θέσετε. Να τα διαχειριστούμε έτσι αυτά τα λεπτά. Αν θέλετε να απευθύνετε ερωτήσεις ή να κάνουμε μια ελεύθερη κουβέντα σε κάποια ζητήματα που μείνανε έτσι ανοιχτά. Θα θέλατε?
Thank you. I would like to welcome Mr. Aris. And, I was born in Sweden, in Stockholm. I'm a writer as well, and a member in your writer union. The reason is that I would like to express myself because I'm not fluent. We came back in Greece many years ago. I often visit Stockholm to cooperate with writers, but the truth is that the language makes you feel uncomfortable. And because I'm not fluent in the Swedish language, I also use the English language. This is a great truth that when you can express yourself in the local language, so you feel you are not a part of an event, even though think about those refugees who try to express themselves and became a part of a country, and they need so much time. Do you think that the only reason to be a part and take part in a community is the language, or the helping system from the country to make these people, refugees, became a part into the society? Do you believe that only the language can help these people, even though they are writers or citizens, to become a part of the community?
Νομίζω θα μπορούσε να απαντήσει και ο κύριος.
Of course, yes, thank you.
Well, when we look at the past, and if we stay with writers, I think you cannot just say that it's only the efforts of the country of asylum, if it has assistance schemes and so on, which will help that to happen, because previously these policies often did not exist. The first thing which is absolutely necessary is that you have basic security, and then it will help, of course, if assistance policies early as possible are made to enable the people to learn the local language and so on, of course. But it is not a prerequisite for people to succeed, and the will to survive, to react, to continue one's life can be stronger, and you cannot really deduct any behavior because generally it will help, but you have so many examples of people whose spirit and willingness is so strong that they will succeed anyway. I was just thinking also of one example which is totally different, but this Afghan cook in MasterChef here, Zaire, who in an area which is totally different from literature, but where his perseverance, his willingness make him succeed in these cooking competition that are very much Greek. You know how important recipes and the way of cooking here is, and that this young Afghan person is succeeding in this very Greek competition is an example, I think, for many, that everything is possible, despite not having yet the Greek government to support enough in the language courses.
Well, I don't have a good answer to your question, but I could quote James Joyce during the heroic period of the 20th century, in the early 20s. He said that there are three things that a writer needs to take into consideration: exile, and being an exile himself, he knew what he was speaking about; silence, and cunning. And I think that in order to survive as a refugee or as a writer, whatever, you need to have a certain relationship to all three categories, and cunning not least.
Actually, I'm not a specialist in the integration of the refugees, but for me, I'm very keen to my language, to my mother language as Arabic. For me, the other language is for the communication only, to read, to know what happened in the world. But the Arabic language, for me, this is the language of the sentiments, of thinking, to write. So from the beginning, I get my way as a writer in Arabic language, and I thought from the beginning my books will be translated to other languages. So it's, after that, this is what happened. My book's now translated in 18 languages. So yeah, for me, from the beginning, I decided to write, to think in Arabic language. Every week, I'm writing 3 articles, political articles in the newspapers. I'm engaged in Arabic question. I'm Belgian now as a nationality, talking in French with the people, or with the, because I studied French when I was in Baghdad, talking in English. I studied Germany at that time when I was in Baghdad, also I can understand in Germany. I know many languages, Oriental languages, but you know, for me, the writing and the Arabic also, Arabic questions for the modernity, relationship with the West, the place, for example, of the women in the society. This is my engaged, or this is my role as intellectual in Arabic world. So the language is very important for me. I don't know for the others how is it, I don't know.
Δεν μας μένει παρά ένα λεπτό για να παραδώσουμε τον χώρο. Νομίζω ήμασταν πάρα πολύ συνεπείς στην διαχείριση. Τώρα, εγώ δεν έχω την εμπειρία του προσφυγικού ξεριζωμού. Δεν χρειάστηκε να ζήσω πολύ μακριά από την χώρα μου και κυρίως από αυτό που θεωρώ χώρο μου, τη Θεσσαλονίκη. Είναι τελείως διαφορετικό να ζεις στη Θεσσαλονίκη από ό,τι είσαι στην Αθήνα. Και τα μικρά διαστήματα που αναγκάστηκα να μείνω στο εξωτερικό γύριζα πίσω γιατί ζητούσα την αυλή μου και το παράθυρό μου για να τεινάξω την κουβέρτα μου, που είναι μια πολύ ελληνική συνήθεια. Από τις συναντήσεις που έχω κάνει αυτά τα 47 χρόνια του δικού μου βίου, ξεχωρίζω 4 ήρωες, που όλοι έχουν το ίδιο τέλος στο διήγημά τους. Είναι ο Μπαριολάη από το Αφγανιστάν, που ήταν πρόσφυγας, ήταν η Μαρία από μια χώρα της Λατινικής Αμερικής, τη Βενεζουέλα, και ήταν οι 2 μου παππούδες, οι πρόσφυγες από την περιοχή της Ανατολικής Θράκης. Ο Μπαριολάη, όταν του ρώτησε τι του λείπει περισσότερο, μου είπε ήταν η αγκαλιά της μαμάς του και σε αυτήν ήθελε να επιστρέψει. Όταν ρώτησα τη Μαρία τι θα ήθελε και τι ονειρεύεται, μου είπε να είχα τη δυνατότητα να ανοίγω μία πόρτα και να μπαίνω στην κουζίνα της μαμάς μου. Και το όνειρο του παππού μου ήταν από την Ανατολική Θράκη του Κεσάνη, που πάντα το βράδυ, δηλαδή τις περισσότερες φορές, έβλεπε πώς περνάει την Μαρίτσα, τον ποταμό Μαρίτσα, τον Εύρο, για να πάει να καθίσει κάτω από τη σκιά της μουριάς του δέντρου του. Αυτά είναι. Τελικά όλοι το ίδιο είμαστε. Σε αυτή τη μεγάλη χώρα που λέγεται η Γη. Σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Ήταν τιμή μου να συντονίσω την εκδήλωση.